They thought they could break you, thought you'd stay quiet, that you'd shrink, that you'd fold, that you'd disappear into the background while they laughed, while they lied, while they moved on like nothing happened. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. See, you didn't scream, you didn't beg, you didn't chase, and that silence, that was the most dangerous sound in the world. Because it wasn't surrender, it was strategy. You weren't falling apart, you were falling back into focus, into power, into position. There's a reason people fear the calm before the storm. They thought crossing you was clever. They thought using you was easy. They thought disrespect would keep you down. What they didn't see was the look in your eyes the moment you stopped needing their approval. That was the beginning of their end. That was the moment everything shifted. You were underestimated, overlooked, misread, and they'll regret that for the rest of their lives because it's over for them now. You're not coming back the same. You're not showing up soft. You're not here to prove anything. You are the proof. And they made the biggest mistake of their life. Now watch what happens next. The moment they crossed you, everything changed. Not just for you, but for them. Because in that one decision, in that single act of betrayal, disrespect, or manipulation, they revealed exactly who they were. And more importantly, they gave you permission to become who you were, always meant to be. See, people think crossing someone is just a game, a move, a power play. They think it gives them some sort of control, like they can shake your foundation, make you question your worth, or paralyze your momentum. But what they fail to realize is this. Some of us were built from fire. Some of us carry pain, like armor. And when you betray someone who has survived more than you could even imagine, you don't wound them, you wake them up. That moment when they talked behind your back, when they left you out, when they dismissed your value, when they tried to take something from you that they never gave in the first place, that moment wasn't just about them hurting you. That moment was them setting their own clock, a countdown, because what happens next, that's not your downfall. That's their exposure. They didn't realize you pay attention, that you don't just react, you observe. You don't just feel, you analyze. You don't let anger lead, you let it teach. And in that quiet behind that composed face, behind the calm tone of your voice, you were collecting every detail, not to retaliate, but to evolve. They thought they were getting away with something, but the truth is they were handing you the blueprint. They were giving you the exact playbook to rise above them, because the minute someone shows you their character, who they are, and they think you're not watching, is the minute you gain absolute clarity. No more illusions, no more hope for who they could have been, just truth, cold, hard, unfiltered truth. And here's the part they never expect. That moment doesn't break you. It builds you. It doesn't destroy your spirit. It sharpens it, because now you know, now you see, and you can't unsee it. That moment becomes your pivot point. The fire they thought they lit to burn you. You turned it into fuel, into power, into a weapon of focus. What they didn't realize was you were already strong, already disciplined, already a force. But now you have clarity, now you have purpose, now you're dangerous, because you're no longer distracted by potential, by excuses, or by empty apologies. You're done giving second chances to people who only show up to take. You're done explaining your standards to people who never intended to meet them. You're done shrinking so others can feel comfortable in their mediocrity. They wrote their own ending when they decided to cross you, and not because you're going to retaliate, not because you're going to stoop to their level. No, that's not your style. That's not how real power moves. You're going to do something much more terrifying. You're going to outgrow them, outwork them, outlast them. You're going to live in such a way that they can never reach you again. Not because you're hiding, but because you've ascended. Because you took that pain, and instead of folding, you forged something unbreakable. Let them keep talking. Let them pretend they won. Let them convince themselves that you're the villain in their story. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to prove anything, because the outcome is already written, and they wrote it. Not with words, but with actions. People always reveal themselves before the collapse. It's always the arrogance that gives them away. It's the entitlement, the way they take your loyalty for granted, the way they treat your kindness like weakness, the way they think your patience is a void they can exploit. But what they don't see is that all of that was a test, one you never had to announce, one they never knew they were failing until it was too late. And now the story is no longer about them. It's about what you do next. It's about how you rise, not for revenge, but for revelation. It's about how you rebuild, not to impress, but to protect. It's about how you reclaim your time, your energy, your peace, because they never deserved access to any of it. You gave them a chance, you gave them loyalty, you gave them truth, and they gave you disrespect, deception, disappointment. So now you give them distance, you give them silence, you give them the door, and you close it, gently but firmly, without hesitation. Because once someone shows you that they're willing to gamble with your trust, you stop letting them sit at your table. You stop letting them occupy your mind. You stop carrying people who were only ever dead weight in disguise. They wrote their own ending the day they chose ego over loyalty, pride over respect, games over honesty. And now you write the next chapter. And this time, it's not about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Right for surviving. Right for enduring. Right for refusing to break even, when everything around you was trying to make you doubt yourself. The moment they crossed you was the moment they lost access to the most powerful version of you. The one that doesn't beg, doesn't explain, doesn't chase. The one that builds in silence, moves in purpose, and wins with grace. And that, right there, that's why it's over for them. They never saw it coming. Not because you were hiding, but because they weren't looking. They were too distracted by their own ego, too wrapped up in the illusion of control, to recognize what was standing right in front of them. You, the storm they thought they could walk through without consequence. The force they mistook for calm. The battle-tested soul that doesn't flinch anymore. They assumed you were like everyone else, that you'd break the first time someone hurt you, that you'd back down when challenged, that if they pushed hard enough, you'd snap. But they didn't realize this isn't your first war. You've fought harder battles just to get out of bed. Some mornings, you've survived things they couldn't even name. And while they were out there playing games, you were out here fighting for your life, for your identity, for your peace. You were built for the storm, not because you wanted to be, but because life gave you no choice. It threw everything at you: loss, rejection, betrayal, fear. And each time you were hit, you got back up. Not out of pride, out of necessity. You learned how to stand alone, how to rebuild from pieces no one thought you could recover, how to smile with pain still pressing behind your ribs. And because of that, nothing they throw at you now can reach you the way they think it can. They don't know about the nights you cried and still got up the next day like nothing happened, the times you had to encourage yourself because there was no one else around, the way you mastered your emotions, not to suppress them, but to protect your energy from people who feed on weakness. They see a composed exterior and think it's softness. They hear silence and think it's fear. They read patience as passivity. But what they fail to see is that everything you do is intentional. Every step you take is calculated. You're not reacting, you're building. There is a certain kind of strength that doesn't yell. It doesn't perform. It doesn't seek applause. It just is. Quiet, grounded, focused. And that's the kind of strength you carry. The kind that comes from scars, from walking through hell and never losing your soul, from having every reason to be bitter, but choosing to stay disciplined instead. That's what makes you dangerous, not just to them, but to anything that tries to bring chaos into your life. They think they're dealing with the version of you who used to seek validation, the one who explained themselves, who let things slide for the sake of peace. But that version is gone. That version was burned in the fire. What's left now is someone who knows who they are, who knows what they bring, who no longer negotiates their worth. You're not moved by noise anymore. You're not distracted by attention or seduced by empty flattery. You've seen what happens when you trust too easily. You felt the sting of loving people who only showed up to take, and now you don't entertain confusion. You don't chase clarity. You let people show who they are, and you move accordingly. That's not bitterness, that's wisdom, that's survival. They don't know how much you had to unlearn just to get here. The bad habits, the limiting beliefs, the tendency to put others before yourself. You had to rewire your mind, train your emotions, heal wounds that were never your fault to begin with. And while you were doing all of that, quietly, privately, they thought you were stuck. They thought you were weak. But what you were really doing was preparing for this moment, for this elevation, for this exact season where you'd no longer be accessible to people who treated you like an option. They don't understand that some storms aren't meant to be weathered. They're meant to clear the path. That's exactly what you are now. A storm with purpose, controlled, precise, relentless. And every step forward you take now isn't just about growth. It's about reclaiming what was always yours, your power, your confidence, your voice. You no longer explain yourself. You no longer tolerate inconsistency. You no longer invest in people who can't meet you with the same effort. You've been through too much. You've leveled up too far. You know what peace costs, and you're not giving it away just to keep someone else comfortable. They don't get it, and they never will, because people who've never been tested think strength is loud. They think it's about clapping back or proving points, but real strength, the kind you've built, it's silent. It's knowing who you are without needing to convince anyone. It's walking away not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know your energy is currency, and you don't spend it where there's no return. You were built for the storm, and they never saw it, because they couldn't see past their own reflection. They projected their weakness onto you, their limitations, their insecurity, but that's not your burden to carry. That's not your job to fix. Your job is to rise, to move with intention, to keep building, and let the storm speak for itself. Because at the end of the day, the people who tried to break you are watching you rise through the very things they thought would destroy you. That's the kind of power that doesn't need revenge. It just is. Unapologetic, unshakable, and undeniable. They never knew who they were dealing with, but they will. They really thought they had it figured out, thought they were being clever, thought they were moving in silence, plotting behind your back, calculating every little move like they were the mastermind in some twisted game. What they didn't realize was you were never on their board. You were the whole table. They tried to play you, lied to your face, smiled while setting traps, pretended to be loyal while sharpening their knives behind the scenes. But here's what they underestimated. You watch everything. You listen more than you speak. You calculate in silence. They were focused on getting over on you, while you were 3 levels above, already anticipating every possible angle. They didn't realize they were giving themselves away every time they spoke. Their inconsistencies, their micro-reactions, their nervous deflections. You picked it all up, not out of paranoia, but because you've trained yourself to study behavior, to notice tone shifts, eye movements, body language. You don't react immediately because you're not emotional. You're intentional. And that's what made them vulnerable, not you. They thought your patience meant ignorance, that your kindness was naivety, but you saw it all. You just didn't move on it right away. Because power doesn't flinch. Power doesn't rush. Power lets people think they're winning while they build their own downfall. And that's what you did. You watched them dig their own hole, one lie at a time, one misstep at a time, one betrayal at a time, until the truth was so clear, so loud, even they couldn't deny it anymore. They thought they were 2 steps ahead, but you were 10. You knew the ending before they made their first move. You allowed the game to play out, not because you couldn't stop it, but because you wanted to see how far they'd go. You wanted the full picture, the undeniable evidence, because once you cut someone off, it's final. You don't go back, you don't reopen doors, and you don't entertain apologies born from exposure instead of regret. This wasn't the first time someone tried to manipulate you. This wasn't the first time someone underestimated your intelligence. So you didn't panic, you didn't plead, you just observed. With every fake smile, every delayed text, every shift in energy, you took notes, you connected dots. And while they were busy acting, you were preparing for the pivot, preparing for the fallout, preparing to walk away without a single word, because by the time you're done, they'll have nothing left to say. See, the thing about people who play games is they assume everyone else is playing too. They assume you think like them, that you lie like them, that you operate on manipulation and tactics. But you don't. You move on truth, on clarity, on honor. And that's what makes you lethal. Because when someone like you chooses to walk away, it's not impulsive, it's calculated. Final, cold, but clean. They don't get it because they've never had to move that way. They rely on distractions, on illusions, on fake confidence. But you've had to rely on awareness, on instincts, on emotional intelligence. And that's the kind of weapon they can't see coming because it doesn't look like anger. It doesn't look like confrontation. It looks like peace, like distance, like silence. And the moment they realize the game is over, it's too late. You're already gone. You've already replaced the door they had access to with a brick wall. Not out of spite, out of self-respect, because people who try to manipulate you don't deserve access to the version of you who gives without question, who loves without conditions, who supports without hesitation. They tried to play you and they failed. Miserably, because what they didn't account for was your foresight, your ability to connect patterns, your ability to keep your emotions in check while gathering intel. They were playing checkers. You were playing chess. They were playing short term. You were thinking legacy, position, strategy. And here's the truth. You didn't expose them. They exposed themselves. You just gave them the space to do it. That's the most powerful kind of move. When you don't have to say a word, when their own actions become the evidence, when their own lies unravel themselves, that's the kind of intelligence you carry. The kind that doesn't flex, the kind that doesn't demand credit, the kind that doesn't need a crowd. Because when you know who you are and you know what you've seen, you don't need validation, you just need distance. You don't move like them, you don't think like them, and that's exactly why they can't touch you. Let them wonder how you knew. Let them obsess over how you stayed 3 steps ahead. Let them question who told you when the truth is no one had to. You saw it coming the whole time. You just waited for the perfect moment to cut them off. They wanted to be clever, but they never expected you to be unshakable. They never expected you to be analytical. They never expected you to be surgical. And now all they can do is live with the weight of being exposed, not by force, but by facts, by their own behavior, by their own trail of games that led them exactly to this moment. The moment you walked away without ever turning back, because you were never the fool, you were the lesson. They expected you to come back swinging, to make noise, to call them out, drag them through the mud, light up every room with rage and revenge. That's what they would have done. That's the language they understand. Chaos, drama, spectacle. But you're not built like them. Your comeback. It's not loud. It's not messy. It's not for show. It's surgical. Precision. That's what defines your return. Every step calculated, every move designed with intention. You're not out here reacting. You're executing quietly, methodically, and with a level of clarity they've never had. Because they operate off impulse, off ego, off fear. But you operate off principle, off purpose, off truth. See, people think healing means hiding. They think walking away means weakness. But they couldn't be more wrong. You didn't walk away to escape the fight. You walked away because you realized the fight wasn't worth your energy. It wasn't worth your dignity. And real power knows when to stop throwing punches and start building legacies. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need a scene. What you needed was focus, alignment, silence. And that's exactly what you gave yourself. Not because you didn't hurt, not because you didn't want to scream, but because you knew the best way to win was to become so unbothered, so elevated, so locked in on your purpose that they couldn't even reach you anymore. This comeback isn't about them. It's about you. It's about rebuilding your mind, your habits, your standards. It's about showing yourself what happens when you stop watering dead plants and start planting your own damn forest. It's about growth that isn't just visible, it's undeniable. You didn't post about it. You didn't announce it. You became it. While they were watching your silence, mistaking it for weakness, you were studying, training, healing, upgrading. And now that you've returned, you're not making noise. You're making impact. You're not explaining yourself. You're letting results speak, because results don't argue. Results don't beg for recognition. They command it. The difference between you and them is simple. They need attention to feel powerful. You need purpose to feel alive. They perform to be seen. You perform to get free. And when your mission becomes bigger than your emotions, nothing and no one can pull you off track. That's why your comeback scares them, because they can't figure out how you managed to rise without their help, without their approval, without breaking. They watched you fall and assumed you'd stay there. But what they didn't understand is that every setback you've ever had became a blueprint. You study your pain, you mine your failure, you turn losses into data. And when you rise, you don't come back repeating patterns. You come back refined. That's why it's surgical. Because you cut out the noise, you cut out the distractions, you cut out the people who drained you, the habits that caged you, the thoughts that limited you. And when you operate like that, clean, clear, and controlled, there's no resistance, only momentum. You're not throwing shade, you're throwing boundaries, you're not clapping back, you're cashing in on peace, on clarity, on freedom. You're not trying to be seen. You're building a life so aligned, so authentic, that your very presence makes a statement without you having to say a word. This version of you doesn't chase closure, doesn't beg to be understood, doesn't waste breath explaining to people who chose not to listen the first time. You've learned that silence is protection, that privacy is power, that the less people know, the more effective your next move becomes. And while they're still stuck in loops, still trying to win with noise, you're outgrowing everything that used to keep you stuck. You're learning to live above offense, above pettiness, above the need to be right. Because your focus isn't on proving them wrong, it's on proving yourself right. And that's a whole different level of power. Let them wonder what changed. Let them feel the distance. Let them sit with the fact that they no longer have access. Because you didn't just cut them off, you outgrew the version of you that tolerated them. That's the kind of growth no apology can reverse. That's the kind of comeback no one can deny. And now you move differently, with calm, with discipline, with a confidence so quiet it feels like a threat. Because the world doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't need to be loud, to be undeniable, with someone who moves with clarity instead of chaos, with someone who rises, not to be seen, but to be free. This comeback isn't loud because it doesn't need to be. It's not for show. It's for freedom. It's for truth. It's for the version of you who finally realized they were never broken. They were just being sharpened. You're not here to play the game. You're here to end it, quietly, cleanly, surgically. You're not just walking away this time. You're not taking a break. You're not stepping back to cool off or giving them space to fix things. You're shutting the door and it's staying shut. For good. Because something inside you finally clicked. You realize the version of yourself that tolerated disrespect, confusion, inconsistency, betrayal, that version no longer exists. You buried them the moment you saw the truth for what it was. This isn't about being bitter. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving a point. It's about choosing peace over pain, clarity over chaos, and self-respect over second chances. You gave them opportunity after opportunity. You overlooked the red flags. You excused their patterns. You kept showing up with love, with hope, with belief that maybe this time would be different. But it wasn't. It never was. And now you're done. They thought you'd always be there. That no matter how far they pushed, how many times they tested your limits, you'd stay, that you'd keep answering, keep listening, keep forgiving. But they mistook your loyalty for weakness. They confused your heart for dependency. What they didn't realize was that you were keeping score, not out of spite, but out of truth. And truth has a funny way of building a wall once it has enough bricks. You tried harder than you should have. You gave them parts of yourself you never should have handed over: time, energy, trust, silence. And in return, they gave you half effort, empty words, and broken consistency. And the worst part, they didn't think you'd leave. Because people who rely on your kindness never prepare for the day you choose to protect yourself. Instead, So, no, this isn't temporary. This isn't a warning. This isn't a lesson for them to learn and then return from. This is final. Because once you truly heal, once you finally see someone for who they are, not who you hope they'd be, there's no going back. You can forgive, you can release the anger, but you can't forget how it felt. The doubt, the emotional confusion, the pain of wondering why you weren't enough. You're not carrying that into your future. You're done dragging the weight of people who never showed up for you fully. This time, it's not a pause, it's a closure. You're locking the door, not because you hate them, but because you love yourself more. Because peace isn't found in second guessing. Peace lives in the boundaries you enforce, in the energy you protect, in the decisions you make without apology. And this door, it had to be closed so your future could finally breathe. You're not explaining yourself anymore, not repeating what hurt you, not asking to be understood. You said what needed to be said, even if it was only said to yourself. You accepted the apology you never got, and you took that as your cue, not to argue, not to beg, but to rise, quietly, strongly, permanently. Let them wonder why you changed. Let them sit in the silence you used to fill with grace. Let them reach out to an echo that no longer responds, because now you're too far ahead to look back. Not because you're angry, but because you finally know what you're worth. This isn't cold. This is clarity. This isn't punishing them. This is protecting you. You don't wish them harm. You just no longer wish to share space with anything that doesn't honor you. You're not keeping the door open for when they're ready. You're not waiting for the right time. You're not hoping they'll grow. That's their work now, not yours. You've got places to go, peace to build, purpose to pursue, and you don't have time to keep reopening doors to people who only knock when it's convenient. You've learned how to heal in silence, how to rebuild without applause, and that strength, it's not soft, it's steel, forged in disappointment, sharpened by experience, grounded in a love for yourself that no one can shake again. This is your line in the sand. This is your exit, not with drama, but with dignity. You're not burning bridges. You're just finally realizing some people were never meant to cross into your next chapter, and it's not your job to carry them there. So shut the door without guilt, without hesitation, without explaining one more time why you had to. You owe no one access to you just because they once knew you. That version of you, the one they could play with, the one they could manipulate, the one they didn't appreciate, is gone. And in its place stands someone who knows exactly what they bring, what they deserve, and what they're no longer willing to tolerate. This isn't an end fueled by bitterness. It's a beginning rooted in power. The kind of power that doesn't roar. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to make a scene. It simply closes the door and never looks back. They thought crossing you would leave you broken. They thought you'd fall apart, stay silent, stay stuck, but instead you got sharper, smarter, stronger. You rose not out of anger, but out of understanding. You saw the truth, accepted it, and moved. Now you're no longer fighting for attention, for answers, or for closure. You've outgrown the game entirely. This wasn't about revenge. This was about rebirth. You didn't come back louder. You came back untouchable. You didn't ask for respect. You became someone who commands it. And those who tried to play you, they'll spend the rest of their lives remembering the day they lost access to someone they'll never find again. You were never the victim. You were the test, and they failed. So let them feel your absence. Let your growth speak. Let your silence echo, because it's over for them now. And it was the moment they chose to cross you. Their biggest mistake wasn't what they did to you. It was thinking you wouldn't rise from it. You did. And now you're done explaining. You're done proving. You're done looking back. The door is closed. The game is over. And you're just getting started.